Dmitri was 37 years old, earned a steady $61,000 a year operating the anode furnaces at the Asarco copper smelter, and he was beginning to understand that his marriage was a carefully constructed humiliation. The realization didn't come like a lightning strike, but more like the slow, oppressive heat of an El Paso summer, building day by day until the air itself felt heavy and hard to breathe. It was a feeling that often settled in his chest on the drive home, his hand resting on the cracked vinyl dashboard of his 1998 Ford F-150, a truck with 230,000 miles on the odometer and a patina of desert dust that felt more like a second skin than a layer of dirt. The truck, a faithful machine he'd bought for $2,800 cash 10 years ago, had become the focal point of the problem. He loved that truck. Its quirks were his quirks. The way you had to jiggle the key just so in the ignition, the specific groan the engine made on a cold morning, the familiar scent of sun-baked vinyl and faint, lingering machine oil from his work clothes. It was a part of him, a symbol of a life built on tangible things, hard work, reliability, and paying your own way. But to his wife, Lourdes, and especially to her ex-husband, Gregory, the truck was something else entirely. It was a punchline. A prop in a long-running joke he was only now starting to hear clearly. The first few times he'd laughed along. It was easier. At a family Christmas party at Gregory's sprawling $1.8 million estate in the Mesa Hills, Gregory had clapped him on the back, his $3,000 Tom Ford suit smelling of expensive cologne and entitlement. "Dmitri, good to see you, man. Did the old workhorse make it up the hill all right?" he'd boomed, loud enough for everyone in the marble-tiled foyer to hear. Dmitri had managed a tight smile, nodding. "She runs fine, Greg." Lourdes, standing beside him in a $1,200 silk dress Dmitri knew they couldn't really afford, had just squeezed his arm. A gesture that felt less like support and more like a warning to play along. He had no idea then how deep the rot went. He didn't know that this wasn't a spontaneous jab, but a pre-written line. He was a character in a play, and he hadn't even seen the script. The humiliation was a slow poison, and he was only just beginning to feel the effects. He had no idea what was coming, that a simple trip to his own garage would soon set his entire world on fire, burning away the lies to reveal a truth more valuable and devastating than he could ever imagine. Have you ever felt like you were the last person to get the joke? Let us know in the comments if you've ever been in a situation where everyone seemed to know something you didn't. And stick with us to see how Dmitri turns the tables on the people who underestimated him most. The facade of their life was built in a modest 1,200 square foot bungalow in Sunset Heights, a home Dmitri had inherited from his grandmother. It was a place of simple comforts. The original hardwood floors, which he'd sanded and refinished himself over 3 weekends, glowed with a warm, honest light. The smell of his coffee, a $12 bag of ground beans from the local grocery store, filled the small kitchen every morning at 5:15 a.m. before his shift. These were the rhythms of his life, the bedrock of his contentment. He'd lived a life that valued substance over style, a philosophy inherited from his late Uncle Marcus, a man who had taught him how to change the oil in a car before he knew how to properly tie a tie. Lourdes had at first seemed to share those values. When they met, she was a paralegal making a decent living, impressed by his stability and his kind, quiet nature. She praised the way he cared for the small house, the calluses on his hands a testament to his work ethic. Their early years were a collage of simple, happy scenes. They'd spend Saturdays working in the small yard, planting bougainvillea that now spilled over the weathered fence in a riot of pink and orange. He'd cook on his $400 Weber grill while she made a pitcher of iced tea, and they'd eat on the small concrete patio as the sun dipped below the Franklin Mountains, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery gold. He loved watching the light catch the deep brown tones of her skin, making it seem luminous. Her hair, which she wore in elegant twists, would frame a face he thought was the most beautiful he had ever seen. But something had shifted after she reconnected with her ex-husband, Gregory. It started subtly. Gregory's wife, Tamara, had invited them to a charity gala. Lourdes insisted they go. She bought the $200 dress, arguing it was an investment in their social life. Dimitri, in his only suit, a perfectly respectable but unremarkable $350 suit from Dillard's, felt like a man wearing a costume. He stood awkwardly by the open bar, nursing a single beer, while Lourdes moved through the crowd with an ease that stunned him. She belonged there, among the glittering jewelry and hushed, important conversations. He saw her laughing with Gregory, her head tilted just so. Gregory, a real estate developer who seemed to ooze wealth, was everything Dimitri was not: slick, loud, and draped in visible proof of his success, from his $15,000 Patek Philippe watch to his perfectly tailored clothes. The expensive tastes began to bleed into their life at home. A $2,500 leather sofa replaced the comfortable, worn-in couch they'd bought together for $600 at a furniture outlet. She started talking about moving, about how the bungalow was cramped, and how they deserved more. The comments about his truck started around the same time. "Honey, don't you think it's time for an upgrade? It's just embarrassing pulling up to Gregory's house in that thing," she'd said one evening, scrolling through listings for new cars on her $100 iPhone. Dimitri would just shake his head. "The truck runs fine, Lou. It's paid for. Why would I take on a $700 a month car payment?" Her sighs became more frequent, theatrical displays of disappointment. The domestic normalcy was still there, the morning coffee, the shared meals. But now it was underscored by a current of tension. He'd come home from a 12-hour shift, his body aching from the heat of the smelter, covered in a fine layer of dust, and find her dressed for a dinner with friends he hadn't been invited to. He felt a growing distance between them, a chasm opening up right in the middle of their small living room, separating his world of honest labor from her world of aspiring luxury. He just didn't realize she was actively pushing him to one side, clearing a path for someone else. The cruelty had been escalating for months, a campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts. Dimitri, a man who believed in the good of people, had mistaken each jab as a thoughtless comment, an isolated incident. He hadn't seen the pattern, the coordinated effort orchestrated by his own wife. He hadn't understood that his humiliation was their private entertainment. The first time it truly stung was at his own birthday dinner 4 months prior. They were at a steakhouse downtown, a place Lourdes had picked, where the entrees started at $50. Gregory and his wife Tamara were there. Dimitri had driven, parking his F-150 2 blocks away to avoid the valet. As they settled into the booth, Gregory had leaned forward, a conspiratorial grin on his face. "So, Dee, what did you get for the big day? A new set of tires for the Relic? Maybe some of those fuzzy dice for the mirror?" Lourdes had laughed, a high, tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, stop it, Greg, you're terrible," she said, but she playfully slapped his arm, a gesture of encouragement. Dimitri felt a hot flush creep up his neck. He looked at Tamara, a sharp, intelligent woman who was a partner in Gregory's firm. She offered a small, apologetic smile, a silent acknowledgement of her husband's boorishness. "It's a good truck," Dimitri had said quietly, his voice lost in the clatter of the restaurant. For the rest of the meal, he felt invisible, a prop in their shared history. He paid the $480 bill with his credit card, a purchase that would take him 3 months to pay off. The next incident was at a 4th of July cookout at a mutual friend's house. The host, Mark, was one of Dimitri's oldest friends from the plant. It was supposed to be his turf, a place of comfort. But Lourdes had invited Gregory and Tamara. As Dimitri stood by the grill, turning burgers with a practiced hand, Gregory sauntered over, holding a craft beer. "You know, Dimitri, I was thinking," he began, his voice carrying across the yard. "That truck of yours is the perfect metaphor. An old truck for a small life. Reliable, gets the job done, but it's never going anywhere fancy." The words hung in the hot, still air. A few people chuckled uncomfortably. Mark shot Dmitri a concerned look. Dmitri's hand tightened on the spatula. He could feel 20 pairs of eyes on him. He looked for Lourdes, his wife, his partner, expecting her to leap to his defense. He saw her standing near the patio table talking to Tamara. She'd heard it. He knew she had. She met his gaze for a split second, then looked away. Taking a delicate sip of her white wine, a silent, damning abdication. In that moment, her silence was louder than Gregory's insult. It was an endorsement. Dmitri turned back to the grill, the sizzle of the burgers suddenly deafening. He felt a profound sense of loneliness, a feeling of being betrayed in his own backyard, among his own friends. He had no idea that the punchline, "an old truck for a small life," hadn't been Gregory's invention. It was a phrase Lourdes had texted him the night before, a perfect little barb she had sharpened just for the occasion. The betrayals became more brazen. Lourdes would accidentally mention how Dmitri was saving up for a new tool set for the truck, a $400 Craftsman kit he'd been wanting, and Gregory would immediately offer to just buy him a whole new truck as a joke, laughing at the absurdity of it. She would recount stories of the truck breaking down, minor incidents Dmitri had handled himself, and frame them as near disasters, painting him as a man clinging to a failing piece of machinery out of stubbornness or poverty. Each story, each joke, was a carefully placed stone, building a wall between Dmitri and the people around him, isolating him in a narrative of his own inadequacy. He was the simple, small man with the old truck, a charmingly rustic caricature they had created for their own amusement. And the artist, the one supplying all the intimate, painful details for the portrait, was the woman who slept in his bed every night. The outrage was a slow-burning fuse inside him, getting shorter with every condescending laugh, every dismissive smile. He just didn't know yet that the final, explosive detonation was only days away. Saturday, July 22nd, arrived with the brutal, unapologetic glare of the El Paso sun. The heat was already radiating off the asphalt by 10:00 a.m. as Dmitri loaded a $40 igloo cooler filled with beer into the bed of his F-150. Today was another mandatory social event, a summer barbecue at Gregory and Tamara's estate. Dmitri dreaded these gatherings, the feeling of being an exhibit in someone else's zoo. Lourdes was already dressed, wearing a white linen sundress that cost more than his weekly grocery bill. She came out of the bungalow, her phone in her hand. "Ready to go?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. The drive to Mesa Hills was a journey between worlds. They left the quiet, tree-lined streets of Sunset Heights, with its historic homes and sense of community, and ascended into the manicured, sterile opulence of Gregory's neighborhood. Every house was a fortress of beige stucco, guarded by immaculate landscaping and 3-car garages. When they pulled up, Gregory was standing in the driveway polishing his obsidian-black Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, a $180,000 monument to excess. He looked up as Dmitri's F-150 rumbled to a stop, its engine giving a final weary sigh. A wide, predatory smile spread across Gregory's face. "The guest of honor arrives," he shouted, gesturing to the truck. "I was starting to worry. Thought maybe you'd broken down on the scenic route." Dmitri just nodded, killing the engine. He got out, the familiar squeak of the driver's side door echoing in the cavernous silence of the wealthy street. "Runs fine, Greg," he said, the words feeling worn and useless. Lourdes was already out of the truck, rushing to Gregory's side to give him a kiss on the cheek. "He's so stubborn about this thing," she said, her voice a stage whisper, meant for everyone to hear. "I keep telling him, we're not in a position to be sentimental." The party was in the backyard, a space that looked like a resort brochure. A turquoise pool glittered under the sun, surrounded by expensive lounge chairs. A massive stainless steel outdoor kitchen was already smoking with the promise of grilled meats. About 30 people were mingling, all of them dressed in the casual, expensive uniform of the city's elite. Dmitri felt the familiar unease settle over him. He found a spot in the shade and tried to make himself small. An hour later, the cooler of beer he'd brought was empty. Gregory, who had been holding court by the pool, strode over to him. "Hey D, your beer was a hit. We need a restock. I've got more cases in the garage fridge. Be a pal and grab them." It wasn't a request. It was a command. A way to make him the help. "Sure," Dmitri said, his voice flat. He turned to Lourdes. "Where's your garage, Lou?" He knew she knew this house intimately. "Oh, it's not the main one," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's the detached one at the back of the property. The collector's garage, Greg calls it." Gregory chuckled. "Yeah, I keep my fun toys back there. You'll get a kick out of it. Probably more horsepower in that one building than in your entire zip code." Dmitri walked away from the party, the sound of laughter and splashing water fading behind him. He followed a stone path that wound through a professionally designed desert garden. The detached garage was a large, windowless structure at the far end of the property. It looked more like a bunker than a garage. He found the side door and stepped inside, the sudden cool, conditioned air a relief from the oppressive heat. But it was what he saw that made him stop breathing. The space was cavernous, climate-controlled, and lit with museum-quality track lighting. And it was filled with cars, not just any cars, a vintage Ferrari, a classic Porsche, an Aston Martin. He recognized them instantly. They were his uncle's cars, his heart hammered against his ribs. He walked slowly through the space, his work boots silent on the polished concrete floor. He ran a hand over the fender of a perfect, cherry-red 1967 Jaguar E-Type. He saw the 1958 Porsche 356A Speedster his uncle had lovingly restored, and there in the center of the collection, under a custom car cover, was a familiar, angular shape. He lifted the corner of the cover, a 2014 Lamborghini Murcielago, painted in a deep metallic blue, his uncle's last and most prized acquisition, the entire collection, 7 priceless vintage cars and 1 supercar. A collection he had inherited 3 years ago upon his uncle Marcus's death, a collection he had immediately put into secure, climate-controlled storage while he figured out what to do with it. A collection he had told his wife about, a secret he had trusted her with, a collection that was supposed to be in a storage facility on the other side of town. He felt the blood drain from his face. His uncle's cars. Here, in Gregory's garage, he looked around and saw it, a small plaque on the wall. The Gregory Vance Collection. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. The jokes, the constant invitations, the shared history he'd felt excluded from. It wasn't just a shared history, it was a shared present. He stumbled back, his mind reeling. He had to get out. He turned and saw the cases of beer in the commercial-grade refrigerator. He grabbed 2, his hands shaking, and walked back out into the blinding sunlight, his world completely and irrevocably shattered. He now understood. The joke wasn't about his truck. The joke was him. Walking back to the party was the longest journey of his life. Each step on the hot stone path felt deliberate, heavy. The cases of beer, a generic $25 brand, felt impossibly flimsy in his hands. He could feel the phantom weight of what he'd just seen, the cool, solid steel of a 1967 Jaguar, the sleek lines of a Lamborghini worth more than every house on his street combined, his cars, displayed as another man's trophies. He re-entered the backyard, and the cheerful noise of the party felt alien, like a broadcast from another planet. Gregory saw him and clapped his hands together. The beer man delivers. What did you think of the man cave, D? Pretty sweet, huh? Dmitri looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. He saw the smugness, the unearned confidence of a man who had never known a day of real struggle. Then his eyes found Lord's. She was watching him, a flicker of something. Anxiety? Guilt? In her expression before she quickly masked it with a bright, false smile. She knew, of course she knew. She had to have arranged it. The logistics, the transportation of the cars from the storage unit he was paying $800 a month for to this shrine of arrogance. This was the moment he was supposed to break, to yell, to confront, to cause a scene. He could feel the rage coiling in his stomach, a white-hot furnace. But his Uncle Marcus had taught him more than just how to tune an engine. He'd taught him the value of patience, of strategy. Never show your hand until you're ready to win the whole pot, he used to say. Dmitri felt a strange, cold calm descend over him. It was the composure he learned on the smelter line, where one emotional mistake could have catastrophic consequences. He adopted a mask of placid indifference. "It's a nice garage, Greg," he said, his voice even. He set the beer down. "Lots of nice cars." Gregory's smile faltered for a second, disappointed by the lack of a bigger reaction. "Yeah, well, it's a passion. You get it, right? A guy's got to have a hobby." "Sure," Dmitri said. He walked over to Lord's. "I'm not feeling great. The heat, I think. I'm going to head home." Panic flashed in her eyes. "What? No, don't go. The food is almost ready." She was afraid of what he would do, of what he knew. "I'm going," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You can get a ride with Greg." He turned and walked away without looking back. He could feel her eyes on him, her panic radiating across the manicured lawn. The drive home was a blur. The old F-150, the subject of so much ridicule, felt like a sanctuary, the only honest thing left in his life. He parked in front of his bungalow and went inside, the silence of the house pressing in on him. He sat on the edge of the $2,500 sofa she had insisted on, and for the first time in years, he felt the profound weight of his uncle's absence. He had not only been betrayed by his wife, his uncle's legacy had been desecrated, turned into a prop for her social climbing. Lourdes came home 2 hours later. She found him in the living room, watching a baseball game on TV, the volume muted. She tried to act normal, her voice artificially bright. "Hey, you, feeling better?" "A little," he said, not taking his eyes off the screen. She sat next to him a little too close. "So, that was weird today? You leaving like that? What was that about?" "Just the heat," he repeated. She launched into a story about the party, about who said what, her words a frantic smoke screen. He let her talk. He nodded in the right places. He was playing a part now, the simple, unsuspecting husband. While she chattered on, he was making a list in his head, a cold, methodical checklist of everything he needed to do. That night, he waited until she was fast asleep, her breathing deep and even. He slipped out of bed at 2:17 a.m. and went to the kitchen where she'd left her purse. He took out her iPhone. He knew her passcode. She'd told it to him ages ago, a casual, trusting act that now felt like a fatal mistake on her part. He plugged the phone into his laptop, a 5-year-old Dell he'd bought for $600, and began a full data transfer. He found the text threads with Gregory. It was all there. Months of it. Lourdes. "He's going to the 4th of July thing at Mark's. We should come. I have a great line for you." Gregory. "Oh yeah? Hit me." Lourdes. "An old truck for a small life. It's perfect. He'll hate it." Gregory. "Vicious. I love it. See you there." He scrolled back further, his stomach churning. He found the conversations about the cars. Lourdes. "He still has no idea. He thinks they're in that dusty storage unit off the I-10. Gregory, my guy said the Lamborghini alone is worth over 1.5. You sure he won't check on them? Lords, he never goes there. He said he can't stand to look at them yet. It reminds him too much of Marcus. He just pays the bill every month like a good little soldier. Gregory, perfect. The plaque for the Gregory Vance collection arrived today. It looks amazing. Dimitri's hands were shaking, not with rage anymore, but with a chilling clarity. He copied every message, every photo, every call log onto a brand new $20 SanDisk thumb drive. He saw the financial app notifications. Lords had been transferring money from their joint savings account, the one he deposited $200 into every week without fail, to her private account. Small amounts at first, then larger. A total of $14,080 over the last 6 months. It was all there. A comprehensive, irrefutable record of her betrayal. He ejected the thumb drive, put her phone back in her purse, and went back to bed. He lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing but the cold, hard certainty of what he was about to do. The game was over. He had the winning hand. Monday morning arrived, gray and overcast. A rare summer rain began to fall over El Paso, washing the dust from the streets and mirroring the quiet, cleansing fury in Dimitri's heart. At 6:47 a.m., he was sitting in the waiting room of one of the top divorce attorneys in the city, a man named Arthur Klein. The office, in a glass tower downtown, was the epitome of expensive discretion. The coffee was served in a porcelain cup, not a paper one. Klein's fee was $100 per hour, a sum that would have made Dimitri balk just 3 days ago. Today, it felt like a bargain. Klein, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a perfectly tailored Zegna suit that probably cost $700, listened without interruption as Dimitri laid out the story. Dimitri spoke in a low, steady voice, presenting the facts without emotion. He didn't talk about his hurt feelings or the betrayal. He talked about assets. He placed the small thumb drive on the polished mahogany desk. This contains text message conversations between my wife, Lourdes, and her ex-husband, Gregory Vance, dating back 8 months. They detail a coordinated effort to move, house, and fraudulently represent my personal property as Mr. Vance's. He then slid a folder across the desk. This is the last will and testament of my uncle, Marcus Thorne. It clearly states that I am the sole inheritor of his estate, including his vehicle collection, valued by Sotheby's 3 years ago, at approximately $4.2 million. He pushed another document forward. And this is the most recent insurance schedule for the collection, which I have continued to maintain. You can see the VIN numbers for all 8 vehicles. Klein's eyebrows rose slightly. He picked up the documents, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to intense focus. The texts also confirm my wife has been embezzling funds from our joint savings account, Dimitri continued, his voice as calm as a frozen lake. A total of $14,780. Klein was silent for a full minute, his eyes scanning the pages. Finally, he looked up at Dimitri. Mr. Thorne, this is not a divorce case. This is a demolition. The fraudulent claim over an asset of this value, and the conspiracy to do so documented in these texts. This is a level of malicious intent that the court does not look kindly upon. In Texas, community property is the standard, but inherited property is separate property. That collection is yours and yours alone. She has no claim to it. What she has done is opened herself up to significant civil and potentially criminal liability. Dimitri nodded. I want to file today. I want her out of the house, which is also inherited and solely my property. I want a restraining order preventing her from contacting me or coming near my property. And I want to ensure she receives absolutely nothing more than what she is legally entitled to, which I hope is very little. Klein leaned back in his chair. That can all be arranged. And what about Mr. Vance? A cold smile touched Dimitri's lips for the first time. Mr. Vance is married to a woman named Tamara Vance. She's a partner at his real estate firm. I believe her name is on all their financial accounts. I would imagine she'd be very interested to see the contents of this thumb drive, particularly the parts where Gregory and my wife discuss their collaboration. I see, Klein said, a glint of admiration in his eyes. He understood immediately. This wasn't just about justice, it was about precision. It was about dismantling the entire structure of their arrogant world, brick by brick. We will file the petition this morning, Klein stated, his voice now firm and energized. We will have a process server at your wife's place of work by lunchtime. We will file for an emergency hearing to have her removed from the residence, and we will draft a letter to Mr. Vance, demanding the immediate return of your property, along with a bill for storage and transportation. As for his wife, I'll leave that part to you. Dimitri stood up. The meeting concluded. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For months, he had been made to feel small, powerless, and poor. But in this sterile, expensive office, surrounded by the levers of power, he realized he was none of those things. He was the one with the $4.2 million advantage. He was the one with the truth. He walked out of the glass tower and into the rain, feeling the city wash itself clean around him. The strike was executed with the quiet precision of a surgeon. At 11:30 a.m., Dimitri sat in his F-150 in the parking lot of a Starbucks on Lexington Avenue, a block away from the law firm where Lourdes worked as a paralegal. He had a clear view of the entrance. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a sheet of bruised gray. He held his phone, a simple $250 Android device, in his hand. The screen showed a new text message, composed and ready to send. It was addressed to a number he'd found in Lourdes' contacts, saved under Tamara V. The message was simple, containing no anger or accusation. It was just a series of screenshots. The first was the text where Lourdes coached Gregory on the old truck for a small lifeline. The second was the exchange discussing the Lamborghini and how Dimitri would never know it was gone. The third was a picture of the plaque that read, "The Gregory Vance Collection." He added a single sentence at the bottom. "Tamara, I thought you should see this. This is my property, in your garage. My attorney is Arthur Klein." His thumb hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. This was the move that would detonate a bomb in the middle of two families. He thought of his uncle, of his quiet dignity, of the legacy that had been turned into a cheap joke. He pressed send. The blue bar crawled across the top of the screen. A moment later, two small check marks appeared. Delivered. He watched, his breath held. 5 seconds passed. 10. Then, the check marks turned blue. Red. At that exact moment, a man in a nondescript sedan pulled up in front of Lourdes' office building, the process server. He got out, holding a thick manila envelope, and walked inside. Dimitri's phone buzzed. A text from his lawyer, Arthur Klein. "She has been served." The first reaction came less than a minute later. His phone rang. "Lourdes." He let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. He ignored it again. A voicemail notification popped up. He listened to it. Her voice was confused, annoyed. "Dimitri? What the hell is this? Some guy just handed me divorce papers at my desk, in front of everyone. Call me. This is insane." His phone began to vibrate uncontrollably. A text from Gregory. "What did you do?" Another. "Tamara is losing her mind. Call me right now." Another. "You son of a bitch, you have no idea what you've just done." Dimitri ignored them all. He started his truck, the engine turning over with its familiar, reliable rumble. A new voicemail from Lourdes. Her voice was different now. The annoyance was gone, replaced by a rising panic. "Dimitri, pick up the phone. What does this mean Fraudulent misrepresentation of assets? What are you talking about? My key to the house isn't working. They changed the locks already? You can't do that. Where am I supposed to go? He pulled out of the parking lot and began the drive toward his home. His home, not theirs. Another call from an unknown number. He answered it, putting it on speaker. Hello? Where is he? The voice was clipped, furious. It was Tamara. I imagine he's trying to figure out how to explain why my $4.2 million car collection is in your garage, Dmitri said calmly. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Your, what? My inheritance. The cars Gregory has been passing off as his own, the ones my wife helped him steal. Check your joint accounts, Tamara. Check the transfer records for the transportation and storage fees. It's all there. There was a choked sound. Then, silence. The line went dead. As he turned onto his street, he saw Lourdes' car, a late-model BMW 3 Series, with a $650 monthly payment, parked at the curb. She was standing on the sidewalk, pulling at the handle of the front door, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. She saw his truck and ran toward him as he pulled into the driveway. Dmitri, what is happening? You have to explain this to me, she screamed, her voice cracking. He got out of the truck, holding his phone. He didn't look at her. He simply pressed play on the last voicemail she'd left him, the one from just a few minutes ago, and turned the volume up so she could hear her own frantic, panicked voice echoing in the quiet street. She stopped dead, her mouth falling open, as she heard her own words. The look on her face was one of pure, dawning horror. It was the look of someone realizing that the game was not only over, but that she had been checkmated from the very first move. He walked past her, unlocked his front door, and went inside, closing it gently behind him. The last thing he heard was a new voicemail notification dinging on his phone. It was Lourdes, and this time she was crying. The consequences cascaded with brutal, systematic efficiency. For Lourdes and Gregory, the world they had built on a foundation of lies and arrogance crumbled not in a day, but in a series of devastating, well-documented blows. For Lourdes, the downfall was swift and absolute. The emergency court order, granted on the basis of the overwhelming evidence of fraud and embezzlement, barred her from the bungalow. She was allowed 15 minutes with a sheriff's deputy present to collect her personal belongings. Dmitri watched from the living room window as she stuffed clothes into a set of $800 Louis Vuitton suitcases, her face pale and streaked with tears. She tried to take the $2,500 sofa, but the deputy, holding a copy of the court order, pointed to the line item about marital versus separate property. The house and its original furnishings were Dmitri's inheritance. The sofa, bought with embezzled funds, was a contested asset. It stayed. She left with her clothes and her car, and nothing else. Her job was the next to go. The public scene with the process server had been humiliating, but the fallout was worse. Her firm, which prided itself on its pristine reputation, fired her 2 days later, citing a morals clause in her contract after they were contacted by Arthur Klein's office regarding the ongoing fraud investigation. Without her salary, the $650 monthly payment on her BMW became an impossibility. The car was repossessed within a month. She was forced to move into a tiny, $950 a month apartment in a run-down complex on the east side of town, a world away from the Sunset Heights bungalow she'd once called cramped. The divorce settlement was a massacre. The judge, incensed by the premeditated nature of the fraud, awarded her nothing. The $14,780 she had stolen was ordered to be repaid to Dmitri, with interest. Her aspirations of a life of luxury had evaporated, leaving her with nothing but debt and disgrace. Gregory's collapse was even more spectacular. Tamara, a woman as sharp and ruthless in business as her husband, acted with surgical precision. The text messages were all she needed. She immediately filed for divorce, and, as a majority partner in their firm with control over the operating accounts, she froze all assets. Gregory was locked out of his own company. He couldn't make payroll. He couldn't pay his contractors. The empire he'd built came to a screeching halt. Their $1.8 million Mesa Hills estate was a marital asset and was immediately put up for sale as part of the divorce proceedings. The collection of stolen cars in the garage became a legal nightmare for him. Arthur Klein, on behalf of Dmitri, sent a team to professionally transport all 8 vehicles back to a new, secure facility at Gregory's expense, a bill that came to over $25,000. Gregory was also hit with a civil suit from Dmitri for damages, including fraudulent representation and emotional distress. The suit was settled out of court for a sum Dmitri never disclosed, but which Klein assured him was punitive and substantial. Stripped of his wife, his company, and his fabricated car collection, Gregory became a pariah. News of the fraud, especially the audacious theft of the car collection, spread like wildfire through El Paso's small, gossipy elite. He was uninvited from the charity boards. His country club membership was revoked. The man who had built his identity on the performance of wealth was left with nothing when the props were taken away. The last Dmitri heard, Gregory was living in a rented condo, trying to start a new business, his name irrevocably tarnished. The G-Wagon was sold to cover his mounting legal fees. He had traded a life of authentic success with a brilliant partner for a cheap thrill at another man's expense, and the price had been everything. A year and a half later, Dmitri stood in the open doorway of his garage, a mug of coffee warming his hands. The morning sun was just beginning to crest the Franklin Mountains, casting long shadows across the neat rows of houses in Sunset Heights. The air was cool and clean. His bungalow was no longer just a house. It was a sanctuary, a place he had reclaimed and made his own. The bougainvillea he and Lourdes had planted was gone, replaced by a small, thriving garden of desert plants, agave, ocotillo, and prickly pear, that required little water and bloomed with a fierce, resilient beauty. Inside the garage, which he had expanded and climate-controlled at a cost of $75,000, sat a portion of his uncle's legacy. He'd sold 3 of the cars, the Aston Martin, the Jaguar, and one of the Porsches, to a collector in Arizona for a total of $1.3 million. The money sat in a trust, managed by a financial advisor. But he'd kept the ones that meant the most, the 1958 Porsche 356A Speedster his uncle had taught him to work on, and the 2014 Lamborghini Murcielago, a machine so powerful and beautiful, it still seemed like a dream. The old F-150 was parked right beside it, clean and polished, its place of honor secure. With a portion of the funds, he had established the Marcus Thorne Memorial Scholarship, a program administered through the local community college. It provided full tuition and tool allowances for 5 aspiring mechanics and industrial technicians from El Paso each year. He'd named it after the man who had taught him the value of working with your hands, the dignity of honest labor. Last month, he'd attended the first award ceremony and listened as a young woman with bright, hopeful eyes talked about how the scholarship would allow her to pursue a career as a welder, a dream she'd thought was out of reach. In that moment, watching her thank a man she'd never met, Dmitri felt a sense of wealth more profound than any dollar amount. He didn't date. He wasn't ready. His life was full enough with his work at the smelter, his cars, and his small but growing philanthropic project. His peace was a hard-won prize, and he guarded it carefully. Sometimes, on a clear Saturday afternoon, he would roll the Lamborghini out of the garage. The roar of the V12 engine would turn heads all over the neighborhood. He'd drive it out east, past the city limits, onto the long, empty stretches of desert highway. With the windows down and the immense power of the engine thrumming through his seat, he would drive toward the sunset, the sky a blaze of orange and red. He wasn't running from anything. He was driving toward himself. The car wasn't a trophy or a status symbol. It was a connection to his past and a vehicle for his future. It was a reminder that true value isn't about what people see in your driveway. It's about what you keep in your garage, in your heart, the legacy you honor, the integrity you maintain, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge of your own worth. True wealth isn't what you own. It's what you can't lose when everything you own is taken away. It's character. It's resilience. It's the ability to find peace in a quiet garage and purpose in helping someone else start their own journey. Dmitri had learned that lesson in the harshest way possible, but now, driving into the endless desert horizon, he finally felt free. What do you think is the most valuable thing a person can have? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of justice and new beginnings.